My fiancée slept with her boss while I planned our future, so I sent her wedding invitations back with proof of everything she thought I'd never discover. I'm a 29-year-old guy, and for the longest time, I thought my relationship with Sarah was perfect. We'd been together for 3 years, and every moment felt like it was leading to something bigger. Our dream wedding, our perfect life. I loved her with everything I had. She was beautiful, kind, and always seemed to know exactly what I needed, even before I did. We were the couple everyone envied, or so it seemed. Friends, family, they all said we were the perfect match. Sarah had this charm about her that made her the center of attention, but she made me feel special, like I was the only one who mattered. But if I'm being honest, I was the one doing most of the heavy lifting. I worked overtime at my job, sometimes even picking up extra shifts just to make sure we had enough for the wedding and everything else we dreamed about. She was in school, still finishing up her degree, and I didn't mind. I was happy to support her, happy to play my part in building our future. I loved seeing her smile when we talked about the wedding plans, the life we were going to build together. But there were these moments, small things, that kept creeping up. Things I didn't want to admit to myself. Sarah would complain every now and then about not seeing me enough. She'd say it was hard with my schedule, how I was always working or too tired to go out on weekends. It didn't seem like a big deal at first. I thought it was just pre-wedding stress, the nerves and the pressure of planning everything. I'd reassure her, telling her things would get easier once the wedding was over, once we were settled into our life. I didn't want to believe it was anything more than that, but deep down, I felt a shift, a subtle distance forming between us. I chose to ignore it because I didn't want to see it. I couldn't see it. Not when everything else was going so well. Still, something didn't sit right. But I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I had no idea just how much everything was about to change. Things didn't get better. They didn't exactly get worse, either. But they definitely started to feel different. I thought it was just the pressure of wedding planning. I mean, who wouldn't be stressed about choosing the perfect venue, dealing with family expectations, and trying to make sure everything was perfect for our big day? Sarah had always been the calm one, the one who kept things together when I was stressing about finances or what color the bridesmaids' dresses should be. But lately, I felt like I was the one holding it all together, carrying the weight of everything. Sarah wasn't the same, at least, not the way I remembered her. She still seemed so perfect on the surface, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It started with the little things. She'd get distracted when I was talking, her attention drifting as I explained my day or told her about a new project at work. She'd always make a point to tell me how proud she was of me, how much she appreciated all the hard work I was putting in. But there was a coldness behind her eyes that I didn't want to see. I told myself it was just my imagination running wild. One Friday evening, we were supposed to have a quiet dinner together. I had cleared my schedule for the night. No late work calls, no emails, just the two of us. I thought maybe a night off would bring us back to that easy, effortless connection we used to have. But Sarah was distant. Her smile didn't reach her eyes the way it usually did. She kept checking her phone, her fingers scrolling through messages that she was quick to hide the moment I walked into the room. It wasn't like her. "Everything okay?" I asked, sitting across from her at the dinner table. She hesitated before responding. "Yeah, just work stuff," she said a little too quickly. "I'm fine, really." It should have been nothing. I should have shrugged it off, moved on, but my gut twisted. There was something in the way she said it, in the way she wouldn't meet my eyes. I tried to shake it off, told myself I was overthinking things. We were planning a wedding, for God's sake. Stress was normal, but that feeling, that unease, it wouldn't leave. It was like an itch I couldn't scratch, growing worse every day. And still, I didn't say anything. Not yet, but I couldn't ignore it forever. The tension between Sarah and me kept building, like a slow-burning fire that I was too afraid to face. I couldn't stop thinking about the night she'd been so distant. I tried to convince myself it was just a phase, but something in my gut told me otherwise. She kept texting late into the night, her phone screen lighting up in the dark, and I couldn't help but notice the smile that always crept across her face whenever her messages pinged. The same smile that used to be reserved for me. I didn't want to overreact. I didn't want to be that Githa jealous paranoid fiancé, but my trust in Sarah had been everything, and now it felt like something was cracking. I found myself staring at her phone more than I should have, trying to catch a glimpse of the screen when she wasn't looking. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't help it. I was scared. Scared that I'd see something I didn't want to see. One night, she left her phone on the kitchen counter while she went to take a shower. I was in the middle of making dinner, trying to focus on something that didn't feel so heavy, when her phone lit up again. This time, the message preview was right there on the lock screen. It was from someone named Brad. My heart stopped. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't look away. The message was simple, just a few words, but they hit me like a punch to the gut. You looked amazing today. Can't wait to see you again soon. I didn't know what to feel. Part of me wanted to pick up the phone to read every single word, but the other part of me knew I was already too deep. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of it. Brad, the only Brad I knew, was Sarah's boss, the guy she'd talked about a lot, always with that odd gleam in her eyes, but she'd always brushed it off. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was innocent. Maybe she was just being friendly. But I knew deep down that this wasn't just work. I was fooling myself if I thought it was anything less than what I feared. Sarah came back into the kitchen, toweling off her hair, completely unaware of the storm that had just hit my world. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words felt like they were stuck in my throat. My heart pounded in my chest. She smiled when she saw me, but it didn't feel the same anymore. It felt like a lie. "You okay?" she asked, her voice sweet, almost too sweet. I nodded, forcing a smile, but my stomach was in knots. I couldn't keep ignoring it. Not anymore. I had to know. I had to ask, but how? How could I even start that conversation without completely tearing everything apart? The next day I couldn't focus on anything. I couldn't shake that message from Brad out of my mind. Every time Sarah smiled at me or brushed her hair out of her face, all I could think about was her phone, the messages, the secret smile. The lies that I didn't want to believe, but couldn't ignore. I felt like I was losing myself in this nightmare. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. Sarah and I were sitting on the couch just watching TV. It was supposed to be a quiet night, one of those rare moments where everything felt normal again. But my mind kept going back to that message. Looked amazing today. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, my hands clammy, my thoughts spinning out of control. "Sarah," I said, my voice tight, barely above a whisper. She turned to look at me, her eyes soft and trusting. I swallowed hard. I had to do this. I had to face the truth. "I need to ask you something," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I saw a message on your phone yesterday from Brad." Her eyes widened, just for a second. But she quickly masked it, like she'd done this before. Like she knew how to lie to me without hesitation. "Brad," she repeated, a little too calmly. "What are you talking about?" "Don't lie to me, Sarah," I said, the words finally spilling out. "I saw the message. He said, 'Can't wait to see you again soon.' Why are you texting him like that?" She froze, the color draining from her face. The air between us thickened, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't recognize her. She opened her mouth like she was going to speak, but nothing came out at first. "Look, it's nothing," she finally said, her voice shaky. "It's just work stuff, okay? I didn't think it would bother you." I felt a surge of anger, but mostly it was pain. I could feel my heart breaking, and I didn't know how to stop it. "Sarah, don't," I said, standing up. "I'm not stupid. I know what this is. I've seen the way you look at him when you talk about him. I'm not blind." She stood up too, but her eyes weren't filled with remorse. They were filled with something else, defensiveness. She was trying to control the situation, but I was losing my grip. "It's not like that, okay?" she snapped. "You're overreacting, like you always do. It's just work. It doesn't mean anything." But I could see it in her eyes. She was lying, and I was done listening to it. "You're lying," I said, the words sharp, cutting through the tension like a knife. "I saw the way you acted when you texted him, the way you looked at your phone. You want something with him, don't you?" Her face went pale, and she opened her mouth to say something. But I didn't want to hear it anymore. "I can't do this," I said, my voice trembling with both hurt and anger. "I trusted you. I gave you everything. And this is how you repay me." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't speak. I didn't wait for her to explain. I couldn't. I turned and walked out of the room, not knowing what else to say, but I knew one thing. Nothing would ever be the same again. The days that followed were a blur, a mix of anger, disbelief, and crushing sadness. I barely slept. I couldn't eat. Every time I closed my eyes, All I saw was Sarah, her face, her lies, the way she tried to spin everything into something innocent. But the more I thought about it, the more I knew. This wasn't about some innocent mistake. It wasn't just work. The cold reality hit me like a slap. Sarah had been hiding something from me. She had been lying. And I wasn't the fool I had convinced myself I was. That afternoon, after work, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed answers. I couldn't let this drag on. Let her keep telling me the same story, pretending everything was fine. She'd already crossed a line. Now it was my turn to take control. I pulled out my phone and did something. I swore I'd never do something I regretted as soon as I did it, but I couldn't stop myself. I went through her texts, every message, every exchange. I started with Brad's name. I knew where to look. The guilt was gnawing at me, but I had to know. I needed to know how deep this went. And when I saw it, when I saw the confirmation of what I already suspected, the floor beneath me seemed to drop out. There it was. A message from the night before I found out. The night we had that confrontation. I miss you. I can't stop thinking about you. This weekend, we need to make it official. I felt my blood run cold. Make it official. What did that even mean? I knew what it meant. They'd been seeing each other. This wasn't some workplace flirtation. This was an affair. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through more messages. It wasn't just one exchange. There were days, weeks, months of this. Sarah had been lying to me for so long. The betrayal was suffocating, and I couldn't breathe. But what really hit me like a ton of bricks was the last message I found. It wasn't from Brad, it was from Sarah herself, sent to him in the middle of the night, right after we'd argued. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. I love him, but I don't know if I can be with him anymore. I don't want to hurt him, but I can't stop what's happening. Those words, they cut deeper than anything. The truth staring me in the face, confirming every nightmare I'd been too scared to face. She was already planning an exit. She had already checked out. I felt sick to my stomach. Betrayed, stupid, used. But the worst part? I wasn't even angry. I wasn't sure what I felt anymore, just hollow, empty, like someone had taken a piece of me that I'd never get back. I knew I had to confront her again, but this time, I wasn't going to sit there and let her twist things. This time, I was done. The truth was out in the open. I had all the proof I needed, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I didn't wait long. I couldn't the moment I had all the evidence. I knew what had to be done. I had to confront her, and I had to do it now. I wasn't going to sit here and pretend everything was fine, waiting for the inevitable. I wasn't going to let her keep playing me for a fool. That night, when Sarah came home, I was already sitting on the couch, the room feeling colder than it ever had before. I didn't stand up when she entered. I just stared at her, my hands clenched tightly, the phone in my lap like a weight I couldn't escape. "Hey," she said, her voice soft, trying to sound normal. She hung her keys on the hook by the door. But there was an unease in her tone now, something I hadn't heard before. "Hey," I said, my voice steady, but the words felt like they had to be ripped out of me. "We need to talk." Her face shifted just slightly, but I saw it. She was trying to hide it, but it was there. I didn't give her the chance to dodge it. "I know everything, Sarah," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but it felt like it echoed in the room. "I know about you and Brad. I know about the texts, the lies. The affair?" She froze, her breath catching in her throat. For a moment, she looked like a deer caught in headlights, unable to move, unable to say anything. But then she recovered, her expression shifting to something harder, almost defensive. "It's not what you think," she started, her voice shaky but still trying to convince me. "Don't," I snapped. "Don't lie to me anymore." I saw it. I saw everything. I pulled my phone from my lap and shoved it into her hands, the screen lighting up with the messages, the evidence, the betrayal. "You've been lying to me for months, Sarah, behind my back with him, and you didn't think I'd ever find out?" Her eyes flickered to the screen, and for a brief moment, I saw her face fall. But then, just like that, the walls went back up. She looked at me with contempt, as if I was the one who'd done something wrong. "You're overreacting," she said, her voice cold now. "It's just, it was just a mistake. I didn't mean for this to happen. A mistake." I repeated the words, tasting bitter in my mouth. "No, this wasn't a mistake, Sarah. This was deliberate. You chose him. You chose him over me, over us. And now you're sitting here telling me it's just a mistake?" Her face twisted, a mix of guilt and anger flooding her expression. She opened her mouth, but I didn't want to hear it anymore. "You don't get to make excuses," I said, cutting her off. "I trusted you. I gave everything to you, and you threw it away. This isn't just some mistake. This is who you are now." I could see the cracks in her armor, but it wasn't enough. She wasn't the same woman I thought I knew. She was someone else, someone I didn't recognize. And that's when it hit me. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't even ashamed. I stood up and walked to the door. "I'm done, Sarah. I can't do this anymore. I'm leaving." "I'm not your backup plan while you play this game with him." Her face changed again this time, not in anger, but in fear. I saw her finally break, the tears starting to well in her eyes. "Please," she whispered, "don't go. I'll fix this. I swear, I'll fix it." But I couldn't stay, not after everything. I couldn't fix something that had been broken beyond repair. I turned away from her, my heart breaking with every step I took toward the door. But I knew, deep down, that leaving was the only choice I had left. As I stepped into the hallway, I heard her cry out behind me, but it didn't stop me. Nothing could. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The sound of Sarah's cries echoed in my mind as I walked out the door. I couldn't afford to break, not now, not after everything she'd done. I drove for hours. The car's engine roared as I zoomed through the streets, but my mind was quieter than it had been in weeks. I was angry, yes. I was hurt, devastated, but I was also numb. I had no idea where I was going, or why I was even still driving. I just knew I needed to escape from that house, from her, from all the lies. I ended up at a hotel alone. I took a cold shower, changed into the clothes I had left in the car, and sat in the dark. The silence around me was deafening. I didn't know how to process what had just happened. I had spent years building a life with Sarah. She was supposed to be my partner, the one I was going to grow old with. But now, she was nothing more than a stranger who had betrayed me in the worst way possible. I thought I was done crying, but the tears kept coming. The dam I had built around my emotions had finally broken. And now, there was no stopping it. I didn't hear from Sarah that night. No texts, no calls. It was as if she'd disappeared completely. But I knew she wasn't going to give up. I knew she'd come after me, try to make things right, to salvage what was left of our relationship. The next morning, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Sarah. "I'm sorry. I never meant for this to happen. Please talk to me. We can fix this." I stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. My mind was racing. Part of me wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that this could somehow be fixed, that we could go back to the way things were. But another part of me, the stronger part, knew that it was too late. The damage had been done. The trust was gone, and no apology could undo that. I didn't respond. I just put the phone down, the weight of everything pressing on me. The silence in the room was suffocating, but at least it was mine. The next few days felt like a blur. I went to work, barely managing to focus on anything. I didn't tell anyone what had happened. I couldn't bring myself to say the words out loud. It felt like I was living someone else's life. Sarah didn't give up, though. She kept sending texts, calling, pleading with me to come home. She even showed up at my work, trying to talk to me in front of my colleagues, but I couldn't face her. Not like that. Not when every part of me was screaming for her to leave me alone. It was the first time in my life I had ever felt completely powerless. But it wasn't about her anymore. It was about me. I needed to heal. I needed to rebuild the person I had lost along the way. I started doing the one thing I hadn't done in years. I started focusing on myself. I hit the gym. Worked late on projects that excited me. Reconnected with friends I had neglected. For the first time in so long, I felt like I was finding myself again. But even as I focused on moving forward, I knew there was one final step left. A step that would finally bring me the closure I needed. And I wasn't going to let Sarah or anyone else stop me from getting it. A few weeks had passed since I left Sarah, but the ghost of everything we'd built together still lingered. I threw myself into my work and forced myself to focus on rebuilding my life, but it felt like there was this weight, an unresolved tension that was always with me. Sarah's messages kept coming, calls, voicemails, each one more desperate than the last. She even started showing up at my apartment, knocking on my door. her face a mixture of guilt and frustration, but I didn't let her in. I didn't want to hear the same lies, the same empty promises. I hadn't responded to any of it. I couldn't. I knew that if I let myself soften, even for a second, I would fall back into her trap. The trap she had set for me, the one where I'd keep forgiving her, keep allowing her to tear me down just like she had when I wasn't paying attention. But it wasn't easy. It never is it? Walking away from someone you thought was your person, the one you were supposed to build everything with. There were days when I felt like I'd lost a part of myself. Days when I wondered if I was making the biggest mistake of my life. But then I'd remember what she'd done, the way she'd looked at me, the way she had twisted everything until I didn't even know who I was anymore. No, I wasn't making a mistake. I'd heard her out. I'd given her every chance to come clean, to tell me the truth, to show me that she could be the woman I thought she was. But she never did. Then, one day, I got a call from Sarah's friend, a mutual friend who had been there for us both during the good times. She didn't mince words. "Hey, I know you're probably avoiding her, and I get it," she started. "But you need to know that she's not handling this well. She's been crying, and I can see it in her. She's regretting what she did. She's a mess. I don't know what to tell her anymore." The guilt hit me like a ton of bricks. I felt the old pang of sympathy for Sarah, the old love I had for her, the person I thought she was. But that person didn't exist anymore. I wasn't going to be manipulated into feeling sorry for her. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice steady, but my chest tight. "But it's over. She made her choice. I'm done." I hung up before she could say anything else, but I couldn't just walk away without one last thing, one final act to show Sarah that it was over. That I wasn't coming back. I gathered up all the things she had left behind, clothes, trinkets, notes, everything. There wasn't much, but it felt like a lot to me. A reminder of the life we almost had, of the promises that had been broken. I took everything, packed it into boxes, and drove to her place. It was late in the evening. The sun was setting, casting a soft glow over the quiet street. When I knocked on the door, I saw the surprise in her eyes as she opened it. Her face was pale, eyes red from crying. She looked vulnerable, and for a second, a flicker of the woman I used to love surfaced. But that quickly faded. "I'm done, Sarah," I said, my voice cold and controlled. I held out the boxes. "I'm giving you everything back. I don't need anything from you anymore." Her face crumpled, and she reached for the boxers, her hands shaking. "Please don't do this. We can fix this. I can fix this." I shook my head, my chest tightening. "No, you had your chance. I'm done." As I turned to walk away, she called my name one last time. I didn't look back. The pain of walking away didn't hit me right away. It came later, when I was alone in my apartment, staring at the empty space where she used to be. But even then, I knew I had made the right choice. I wasn't going to let her hurt me anymore. I wasn't going to let anyone take my self-respect and my peace of mind. This was my life now. I was starting fresh, and I wasn't going to look back. The weeks after I left, Sarah felt like an endless cycle of grief and rebuilding. I tried to keep my mind occupied, but there were moments, small pockets of time, where the weight of everything would hit me. I would sit in my apartment, staring at the blank walls, and think about how different everything was now. There was a kind of emptiness that filled the space where she had once been. At night, it was the hardest lying in the bed we used to share, the cold sheets next to me, and the silence that felt suffocating. But somehow, despite the pain, I started to heal. Slowly, the first few days were the hardest, but then the fog began to lift. I began to realize something. This was my opportunity to take back control, to find myself again. I wasn't just a victim of her betrayal. I was a person who could move on and build a better life, even if it was hard to imagine at the time. I started going to the gym again. I pushed myself harder than I ever had before, channeling all my anger and frustration into every rep. It wasn't about getting revenge on Sarah. It was about regaining the strength I'd lost, both physically and mentally. I started picking up old hobbies again, things I used to love but had abandoned when I was focused on her, on us. I began to enjoy being alone, in my own space, without the weight of someone else's lies hanging over me. And then came the day when everything shifted. I was at the coffee shop down the street from my apartment, trying to get some work done. I had my headphones in, the noise of the bustling cafe fading into the background. But then the door opened. I didn't think much of it at first, but when I looked up, I saw her dot, Sarah. She was standing there, her face pale, eyes swollen like she'd been crying for days. Her hair was disheveled, and her hands were shaking as she clutched a cup of coffee in her hands. She looked like a ghost, like someone who had lost everything. For a split second, a part of me felt sympathy for Hertha, part of me that once loved her. But then I remembered. I remembered everything she had done. She saw me. Her eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, she froze, her breath catching in her throat. I could see the guilt, the regret, all of it written across her face. She took a step toward me, but I didn't move. "I couldn't please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Can we talk?" I felt my heart race, my anger bubbling just beneath the surface. She was still asking for my attention, my forgiveness, like nothing had happened. But I had already moved on. "No," I said, my voice firm but not cruel. "We can't talk. I don't want to hear it anymore, Sarah. You had your chance, and you wasted it. I'm done." Her face fell. She opened her mouth like she was going to argue, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she just stood there, her body shaking. And in that moment, I realized something important, something that changed everything for me. I didn't need her anymore. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't waiting for some apology to heal the wounds she had left. I had already healed. I had already moved on, and I was finally free. "You don't get to have any more of my time." "Sarah," I said, turning to grab my laptop from the table. "You made your choice, and so did I." I stood up, grabbed my things, and walked out of that coffee shop, not looking back once. For the first time since everything fell apart, I didn't feel the weight of her on me. I didn't feel the pain of her betrayal anymore. It was gone. I had moved on, and I had never felt more empowered. The next few days felt surreal. I didn't have the gnawing, anxious weight on my chest anymore, the constant second-guessing and wondering if I'd made the right choice. I knew I had, but still, there was this lingering sense of finality that kept pushing at me, tugging at the edges of my thoughts. Sarah had been a huge part of my life for years, and now she was gone. We were gone. I went through my routine, work, the gym, hanging out with friends. I started to reconnect with parts of myself I had neglected, and the more I did that, the more I realized how much I had lost while I was in that relationship, how much of me I had given up. But everything changed when I got a call one evening. It was from my mom. "Hey, honey," she said, her voice tentative like she wasn't sure how to approach me. "I need to talk to you about something." I sat down on the couch, my stomach tightening. I could tell she had something important to say, and my mind raced, wondering if Sarah had somehow contacted my family, if she was trying to manipulate them into taking her side. "What's up, Mom?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She hesitated for a moment before speaking. "It's about Sarah. She's not doing well. She's been texting me and, well, she's asking for your forgiveness. She says she made a huge mistake." I felt a sharp pang of irritation. Why now? Why after everything? After all the lies, the cheating, the manipulation, was she suddenly asking for my forgiveness? "Mom," I said, my voice tight, "she doesn't get to make me feel sorry for her. She chose this. She chose Brad over me, and now she's paying the price." "I know, sweetheart," my mom replied, her voice soft and understanding. "I just think she's really struggling with the consequences of her actions. But you don't have to forgive her. I'm not asking that. I thought you should know." I felt conflicted. I wasn't angry anymore, not the way I used to be, but I wasn't weak. I wasn't going to let her back into my life just because she'd realized she made a mistake. Her regret didn't change the fact that she'd betrayed me in the most hurtful way possible. "I appreciate you telling me, Mom," I said, feeling the weight of it all slowly lift. "But I'm done with her. I've moved on. I'm not looking back. Not now, not ever." My mom didn't argue. She just sighed, as though she understood. After the call ended, I sat in silence for a few minutes, thinking about everything Sarah had put me through. I felt detached. The anger had faded. The hurt was still there, but it wasn't consuming me anymore. What I felt now was closure. It was done. I didn't need to answer Sarah's calls anymore. I didn't need to hear her apologies or her excuses. I had already found my peace without her, and that was enough. The next morning, I gathered the last of her things, the ones I hadn't given back, and packed them into a box. I wasn't going to hold on to anything anymore. I wasn't going to let her keep a part of me. I drove to her place, the same place I'd walked away from weeks ago. The place that had once felt like home, but now felt like a stranger's house. I knocked on the door, and when she answered, her face was tired, eyes red from crying. She opened her mouth to speak, but I didn't give her a chance. I don't want to hear it. "Sarah," I said, my voice calm but firm, "this is the last time we talk. I'm leaving your things here. I'm done." Her face crumpled, but I didn't feel pity. I just felt ... nothing. I put the box on the doorstep, turned around, and walked away. That was the last time I'd see her, and I felt free. It's funny, isn't it? How you can lose yourself in someone else, and only when they're gone do you realize how much of you was never really yours to begin with. For so long I had poured everything into Sarah, into us, into the idea of the life we were supposed to build together. But in the end, it was just an illusion, one that I was lucky enough to wake up from before it consumed me entirely. The first few weeks after I walked away from Sarah felt like a blur, like I was in a fog. I couldn't get out of my own head, replaying every moment, every conversation, every lie she'd told me. But slowly, it started to fade. I didn't need to think about her anymore to breathe. Slowly, I began to take back control. I threw myself into work, yes, but I also started to rebuild the parts of myself that I had neglected. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in years. There was a part of me that thought I didn't need them because I had Sarah. But that was another lie I had told myself. Real friends, the ones who actually cared about me, never stopped reaching out. They never judged me. And in their company, I started to feel like myself, again like the guy I had been before Sarah came into my life. I started taking care of myself physically, too. I hit the gym more, not just to get in shape, but to release all the pent-up frustration and anger that I'd kept bottled up for so long. It wasn't just about how I looked, it was about feeling strong, both physically and mentally. There's something powerful about pushing yourself to the limit and seeing the results, seeing yourself transform into someone you respect. But beyond the physical changes, there was a mental shift too. I realized how much emotional energy I had given to Sarah, how much of myself I had abandoned just to keep her happy, just to keep the peace. And I couldn't do that anymore. I couldn't sacrifice my happiness for someone who wasn't willing to do the same for me. One night, a few months after everything had fallen apart, I was lying in bed alone, of course, and I realized something. I hadn't thought about Sarah in days. The weight of everything she had put me through had finally lifted. The anger, the hurt, the betrayal, all of it had lost its grip on me. And in that moment, I knew I had moved on, not just from Sarah, from the person I used to be, the version of me that allowed someone else to dictate my happiness. That version was gone, replaced by someone stronger, someone more independent. I went to bed that night with the faintest smile on my face. I wasn't completely healed, I wasn't perfect, but I was free. The freedom felt like air in my lungs again. I knew I was ready to face whatever came next. It's strange how time works. The more distance I put between myself and everything that happened with Sarah, the more I realized that I wasn't just moving on from high, was moving on from an entire chapter of my life. That chapter had been filled with hope and love, yes, but also manipulation. In the end, I wasn't just walking away from high, was walking away from everything she represented. And the more I walked away, the more I understood what it meant to be truly free. I'd started dating again, not in some desperate, rebound way, but because I wanted to experience life with someone who valued me, who saw me for who I was, not for who I could be for them. I wasn't looking for perfection anymore, but I was looking for authenticity, for someone who understood the importance of trust. But, if I'm being honest, even though I was dating, part of me was still cautious. Not because I wasn't ready to love again, but because I'd learned something important. I didn't need to rush. I didn't need to jump into a relationship to fill the void that Sarah left behind. I wasn't broken. I wasn't incomplete. I was whole. And the people who came into my life after Sarah, whether as friends or something more, would be part of my life because I chose them. Not because I needed them to validate me, but because they added something meaningful to my world. I'm sure Sarah thought I'd come crawling back, that I'd somehow beg for her forgiveness, like I'd done before. But I didn't. I wasn't that guy anymore. I had finally learned to stand up for myself, to make decisions that were in my best interest, even if they hurt in the moment. A few months after I moved on, I got a message from Sarah again. The usual, a long apology, full of regret and empty promises. She said she had changed, that she wanted to try again. But this time, the message didn't have the usual pull it once did. The words felt hollow, and when I read them, I felt nothing. There was no anger, no hurt, just ... indifference. I deleted the message without responding, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't wondering if I made the right choice. I knew I had. What happened with Sarah wasn't the end of my story, was the beginning of something new, something better. I had found my strength in my pain. I had found my peace in the chaos, and now I was taking control of the life that was waiting for me. I wasn't going to let one betrayal define me, and I wasn't going to let one person's mistakes hold me back as I walked through my days. I finally understood what it meant to be truly free, to not be held captive by the mistakes of the past, but to embrace the future with open arms. And that, I realized, was the greatest gift I could give myself. The end of one chapter had become the beginning of a better one, and I was ready to write the rest of my story.